Salesforce Business Analyst. Let's talk about what they do, why Salesforce is pushing individuals down this route, what this certification looks like, and I'll be giving several tips on what to look for to be able to pass on your first try on the Salesforce Business Analyst test. Let's get into it. Salesforce Business Analysts are responsible for working with business stakeholders to understand their needs, goals, and challenges, and then be able to configure and design Salesforce to put forth solutions to meet those needs, goals, and challenges. They may be involved in the configuration, customization, and testing of Salesforce solutions, as well as involved in the documentation process, as well as training and being able to help the end user understand what has been built. In general, the Salesforce Business Analyst certification is a great way for you to stand out in the marketplace. It's a great way to show your value as well as increase your earning potential. However, it's important to understand the cost and commitment to take the exam, and let's talk about if it's really worth it for you and if it's a part of your goals to develop into a business analyst. Salesforce has recently been pushing the business analyst as a potential career path. Now, if you zoom out a little bit on business analyst, you look at a project manager for someone within the Salesforce ecosystem. They're able to help, whether it's in-house or on a consulting basis, to understand the needs of a business, gather the business requirements from stakeholders, and then be able to either scope that information or pass off that information for those who are actually looking to build solutions. For a lot of people, this is something that they do day in and day out. It's a part of their Salesforce job, but for others, it may be a very different job. And so very important that as you prepare for this exam, take a look at your prior experience. For example, I came from the supply chain world, so a lot of the value stream mapping, the process mapping was something that I was very familiar with, understanding how to map out a process, show where the value is, where the supply inputs and outputs can be a part of that. And so I want to make sure that when you're studying for this, that it will come easy to you if you have a background in business analysis, in process mapping, in gathering business requirements and working with stakeholders. Those that may be working purely admin or purely from a developer standpoint, this won't come as easy up front.
Because apparently you're spinning around and apparently every time you get dizzy.
So I want to be very transparent about that and about how Salesforce is trying to push this certification, in my mind, to get more individuals who are more client-facing, who are understanding the impact of their solutions. So as you evaluate if this is a certification that you would like, whether this is the route or just want to expand on your knowledge of how gathering business requirements helps you understand what solutions and how they impact businesses, let's talk about the actual exam itself and break down the test. So looking at the exam, there are 6 different sections that go into this. I want to talk about 1 or 2 tips on what to look for if you are looking to schedule this exam and take it yourself. The first section is customer discovery, which takes up 17% of the exam. Now here, just 2 tips here is to understand the business analyst role in each step of the development cycle. What is their role? How are they interacting with their own internal team or maybe external stakeholders as a part of the development life cycle? Second tip here is to know what tools are available native to Salesforce and how they can help. 2 real quick I'm going to point out are the optimizer and the health check. Understand what these tools do in Salesforce and how a business analyst can use this to uncover needs for a Salesforce ecosystem and for that company. So again, 2 quick is going to be understand the business analyst role and the life cycle stages, and then understand the different tools available, particularly the optimizer and the health check. Second section here is collaboration with stakeholders, which is going to be 24% of the exam. Now this one is big. Something important to note here is understand the different types of eliciting information from stakeholders, whether it is shadowing, whether it is a interview, whether it's a whiteboarding session. Understand the different ways to gather information from stakeholders and when to use those. You'll get a lot of scenarios on the exam. Know which way to gather information is best for the scenario that you're given. The other piece here you're going to want to know is how to work with competing priorities, whether it is sales versus service, marketing versus sales, etc. Know how to set expectations. That's a big piece of gathering these requirements, is setting expectations for everyone involved, and that way you are hyper communicating the build as well as what you see as deliverables. So again, manage those expectations on competing teams and competing priorities. Third section here is the business process mappings, which take up 16% of the exam. Now, a few quick tips is to know the difference in maps between journey and process mappings, when to use those, when they bring value, etc. The other piece is to know very well UPN. Know how you're going to be able to describe the what, the when, the why, the how, and how UPN helps standardize that. And a quick third bonus is to know when to use different taxonomy, whether it's your internal taxonomy or your customer taxonomy. And by that I mean the different words, whether you use companies or accounts or leads or prospects. When you're gathering information and scoping that out, make sure that you understand the best way to do that to make sure it's consistent across the entire process. Now, the fourth section is requirements, which takes up 17%. A real big piece here that you're going to see a lot is user stories. Understand the proper usage of user stories, understand requirements versus user stories, know the proper structure, etc., and how to use those. User stories can be extremely powerful when you take a step back from the process and understand who is asking, what they're asking, and why. And understand what those look like in a phrase. You'll get a lot of scenarios. You're going to want to understand how you can better construct user stories and use them. Now, another piece is understanding Agile framework. And by that, understanding the difference between Kanban and Scrum, when those are best used, what those look like, and how you can add requirements or change requirements within either framework, whether it's Kanban or Scrum. And lastly, there's a few questions on a version controlled repository. I didn't see anything crazy. A lot of the Trailhead talks about Git and GitHub, etc. But just be familiar with that. Be familiar with why it's useful, when to use it. And so those are really going to help you with this section of the exam. Now, the fifth one is user stories, which takes up 18%. I know I just talked about that, but in the last section, it's more of understanding user stories versus requirements. Now, this one is really diving into user stories. As I mentioned, you're going to want to know what the structure of a good user story is, whether it's too specific, not specific enough, etc. There's going to be tons of questions on user stories. Make sure that you can understand whether what you see is a good one or not, what's missing, how to make it better. Another piece here is understanding the acceptance criteria versus the definition of done. And also understand who comes up with the definition of done throughout this entire process. As a combination of stakeholders, business analysts, admin, etc. Make sure you understand the definition of done and how to use that in a real world scenario. The last section is the user acceptance, which takes up 8%. I personally feel like I saw it a little bit more than that, but in this part of the test, make sure you understand who is involved and what happens or what steps happen after maybe a UAT fails. What are some potential steps afterwards? That'll help you do just fine on the few questions that you see in this section. So those are the 6 sections of the exam and a few tips that you will definitely see as you take it. Now I want to talk about the resources that are available to make sure that you pass on the first try. So to start off with the resources, we'll start off with the most obvious, which is the exam guide. The exam guide helps you walk through the sections that I just talked about and really links to the Trailhead. Trailhead is going to be big here. Now, what's a little different about this exam and the structure of this exam is that not all of it is Salesforce specific. So you might have done well on the certified exam or a platform app builder or advanced admin, but this one isn't so tied into Salesforce directly. This is about gathering business requirements and then being able to translate that into Salesforce. So the Trailhead goes through a lot of process mappings, how to gather information, etc. but very important that you walk through the suggested trailhead, especially if you are not familiar with the business analyst job. If you don't have a client-facing role, you're gonna want to know the different ways that you can gather information. You're gonna wanna know different documentation practices, etc. And so this Trailmix, I think, is extremely useful in preparing for the exam, particularly for those who are not familiar with the business analyst role, haven't had a project management role, and just aren't client-facing. This is a very useful Trailmix. Now this next one shouldn't be a surprise, but the Focus on Force practice test for the business analyst certification, these practice tests are phenomenal. As I mentioned, I had some background as a business analyst and just, project manager and being able to gather requirements. But a lot of this practice exam opened my eyes to the different vocabulary and really just putting a name to what I had already been doing organically. So this is a very, very valuable resource to go through, familiarize yourself with the different terms, particularly with the different process maps, different maps, the agile framework, etc. Focus on Force is going to be your bread and butter. This is where I gain the most value in preparing for this exam. Now I will make sure I link below a few Udemy courses, whether it's Mike Wheeler or David Macy. These are great courses to go through. Again, I particularly recommend this if you just haven't had a client-facing role, you hadn't had to gather requirements, etc. So that wraps it up for this video. Wanted to go through what a business analyst is, the certification, different tips, and resources to pass it on your first try. If this has been helpful, or if you went out and passed it, come on back, give me a like, and go ahead and subscribe. I'll continue to put out content like this. And let me know if I missed anything, or if you have any particular questions about a principle that I explained here. Best of luck on the exam, and I'll see you next time.